In a quiet, tree-lined suburban neighborhood, where the houses all looked like they belonged in a magazine and everyone followed the rules to a T, there lived a guy who decided to shake things up. This wasn't some grand rebellion. He just bought himself a new car. But not just any car. It was a Tesla Model X, sleek, shiny, and futuristic, with those iconic gull-wing doors that made it look like something out of a sci-fi movie. Now this guy, let's call him Alex, was thrilled. The moment he drove it off the lot, he felt like he'd stepped into the future. He couldn't wait to show it off to his neighbors, imagining their reactions as they marveled at its cutting-edge design and eco-friendly features. What he didn't realize, though, was that not everyone shared his excitement. Enter Karen. If you've ever heard the term HOA Karen, then you already have a pretty good idea of what she's like. Karen was the unofficial queen bee of the Neighborhood Homeowners Association, HOA. She took pride in making sure everything stayed exactly as it should be. Lawns perfectly manicured, mailboxes painted the approved shade of beige, and absolutely no holiday decorations left up past January 2nd. To Karen, the HOA guidelines weren't just suggestions, they were sacred commandments etched in stone. On the day Alex brought home his Tesla, Karen happened to be out walking her dog. She wasn't really paying attention until she heard the faint hum of an engine, or rather the lack of one. Turning her head, she saw the black SUV glide silently down the street, its headlights gleaming like alien eyes. Her jaw dropped when she spotted the gull-wing doors. For a moment she stood frozen, staring at the car as if it had landed from another planet. Then, as Alex pulled smoothly into his driveway, Karen snapped out of it. A frown creased her face as she muttered under her breath, "What on earth is that?" Instead of heading back inside, Karen lingered by the curb watching as Alex got out of the car. He stretched, smiled, and gave the Tesla an affectionate pat before heading toward his front door. All the while, Karen's mind raced. Who did this? Guy think he was? Did he not understand how out of place this thing was in their quaint little community? By the time Alex disappeared inside, Karen had worked herself into a full-blown state of indignation. She marched straight to her house, grabbed her laptop, and fired off an email to the HOA board. In it, she ranted about how the Tesla violated community standards and ruined the aesthetic harmony of the neighborhood. She even attached a few photos she'd snapped discreetly from across the street, zooming in dramatically on the car's unconventional details. But sending the email didn't satisfy her. Oh no. Karen was just getting started. Over the next couple of days, she found herself fixated on the Tesla. Every time she passed Alex's house, she slowed down to glare at it, as if her disapproval alone could make it disappear. When other neighbors complimented Alex on his new ride, Karen rolled her eyes and muttered about how people these days cared more about showing off than fitting in. One afternoon, while watering her plants, Karen noticed Alex stepping out of his garage. Without thinking twice, she called out, "Hey you." Alex turned, surprised. "Oh, hi," he said politely, unsure what to expect. Karen wasted no time. "I need to talk to you about that car of yours." Alex blinked. "My car?" "Yes, your car." Karen crossed her arms and tilted her chin up, adopting what she probably thought was an authoritative stance. "It doesn't belong here. It's too flashy, too modern. It sticks out like a sore thumb." Alex chuckled nervously, caught off guard by her intensity. "It's just a car," he replied. "It's energy efficient, quiet, and I don't care about energy efficient," Karen interrupted, waving her hand dismissively. "It's disruptive. People are talking, you know." Alex frowned, sensing that this conversation wasn't going anywhere productive. "Look, I'm sure the HOA has better things to worry about than my car. There aren't any rules against owning a Tesla, so—" "Oh, but there should be," Karen exclaimed, her voice rising. "This isn't Silicon Valley. We're a traditional neighborhood, and we like it that way." With that, she spun around and stormed back to her house, leaving Alex standing there, bewildered. As he watched her go, he shook his head and muttered to himself, "Well, that was, something. Little did Alex know this was only the beginning Karen wasn't the type to let things slide, especially when it came to enforcing her vision of perfection. And as far as she was concerned, the Tesla was a personal affront to everything she held dear. Whether Alex liked it or not, he was about to find himself at the center of a bizarre and escalating feud, one that would test his patience, push boundaries, and turn the entire neighborhood into an unwilling audience. Over the next few days, Karen became borderline obsessed with Alex's Tesla. It wasn't just a car to her. It had become a symbol of everything she feared about change. To Karen, the Tesla represented chaos in a world she desperately wanted to keep orderly. She started noticing it everywhere, parked in Alex's driveway, charging overnight, or gliding silently down the street when he left for work in the mornings. Every time she saw it, her blood pressure seemed to spike just a little bit more. Karen began parking her own car, this old beat-up sedan that looked like it hadn't been washed since the early 2000s, right outside Alex's house. At first, she told herself it was purely coincidental. Maybe she was visiting other neighbors, or perhaps she needed to drop something off nearby. But deep down, she knew the truth. She was keeping tabs on him, and whenever she spotted the Tesla, she couldn't resist snapping pictures of it on her phone. She figured she might need evidence later if things got worse, which in her mind they inevitably would. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky orange and pink, Alex pulled into his driveway after a long day at work. He was tired, hungry, and looking forward to relaxing. But before he could even step out of the car, he noticed Karen standing near his garage. She was leaning against her fence post, arms crossed, glaring at him like a hawk eyeing its prey. "What exactly is that?" Karen demanded, pointing at the Tesla with disdain. Alex sighed internally but kept his cool. "It's my car," he said matter-of-factly, trying not to engage too much. He already knew where this conversation was headed. "This isn't a car," Karen shot back, practically spitting the word car like it was an insult. This is some kind of spaceship." She gestured wildly at the gull-wing doors and sleek lines. "It doesn't fit here. People are talking." Alex raised an eyebrow. "People?" he asked, genuinely curious who these mysterious people were. So far, most of his interactions with the neighbors had been positive. A few folks had stopped by to ask questions about the Tesla, and one kid even begged his mom to let him sit inside it. No one else had complained except, of course, Karen. "Yes, people," Karen snapped. "They're saying it's loud." Alex blinked. Loud? His Tesla was quieter than a library. "I'm sorry, did you say loud?" "It hums," Karen exclaimed, throwing her hands up. "That constant humming noise, it's driving everyone crazy." Alex stifled a laugh. "That's just the motor. It's electric. There's no engine noise." "Well, maybe we don't want electric noises either," Karen huffed, clearly grasping at straws now. "And what about those lights? They're blinding." At this point, Alex decided to cut his losses. Arguing with Karen was like trying to reason with a brick wall. It wasn't going to get him anywhere. Instead, he calmly reminded her that there weren't any HOA rules banning Teslas, or any electric vehicles, and then retreated into his garage. As the door closed behind him, he heard Karen shout after him, "You'll regret bringing that thing here." But Karen wasn't done yet. Over the following weeks, she doubled down on her crusade against the Tesla. She sent emails to the HOA board almost daily, each one more dramatic than the last. One email claimed the car's headlights were causing light pollution. Another accused Alex of violating noise ordinances despite the fact that Teslas are virtually silent. In yet another, she warned that the charging cable posed a tripping hazard to pedestrians, even though their cul-de-sac rarely saw foot traffic. The HOA board, made up of reasonable, if slightly overwhelmed volunteers, quickly grew tired of Karen's antics. They reviewed the community guidelines and confirmed that Alex wasn't breaking any rules. Still, Karen refused to let it go. When polite emails failed to sway them, she resorted to showing up unannounced at board meetings, armed with printed photos of the Tesla and a PowerPoint presentation titled, "Why This Car Doesn't Belong Here." Her arguments ranged from ridiculous to downright baffling. At one meeting, she argued that the Tesla's advanced technology could interfere with the neighborhood's Wi-Fi signals. At another, She claimed it attracted unwanted attention from outsiders, citing a delivery driver who once slowed down to admire the car. The board listened patiently, thanked her for her input, and politely dismissed her concerns. Meanwhile, Alex tried to stay out of the drama. He went about his life, enjoying his new car and ignoring Karen's increasingly bizarre behavior. But avoiding trouble wasn't easy when Karen seemed determined to make his life difficult. She started leaving passive-aggressive notes on his windshield, criticizing everything from the cleanliness of his tires to the placement of his license plate frame. One note read, "Maybe try parking somewhere else? Some of us value peace and quiet." Alex found the notes amusing at first, but eventually they started to wear on him. He didn't understand why Karen was so fixated on his car. Sure, it was different from the sedans and SUVs most of his neighbors drove, but it wasn't hurting anyone. If anything, it was better for the environment. Why couldn't she see that? As the tension between them escalated, Alex began to wonder how far Karen would actually go. Would she ever give up? Or was she planning to wage this war indefinitely? Little did he know, Karen was about to take her campaign to a whole new level, one that would involve calling the authorities and turning their suburban squabble into something straight out of a sitcom. Karen had always been someone who liked to feel in control. Whether it was organizing the neighborhood watch or ensuring everyone's hedges were trimmed to the exact height specified in the HOA guidelines, she thrived on order. But Alex's Tesla? That car was throwing a wrench into everything she held dear. It wasn't just about the car itself, it was what it represented. Change, progress, a future that Karen didn't want any part of. By now, her emails to the HOA board had become almost comical. She'd written one claiming the Tesla's charging cable was a tripping hazard, even though no one ever walked past Alex's garage. Another accused him of creating visual pollution because the car's shiny black exterior reflected sunlight onto her living room window during certain times of the day. The board members tried their best to humor her, but they were growing, tired of her relentless complaints. They reminded her repeatedly that there were no rules against owning an electric vehicle, and certainly nothing about reflecting sunlight being a violation. But Karen couldn't let it go. Every time she saw the Tesla parked in Alex's driveway, it felt like a personal attack. Her frustration bubbled over until she decided to take matters into her own hands. And when Karen took things into her own hands, you could bet it wouldn't. And well, late one night, Alex came home after grabbing dinner with friends. He turned onto his street, the headlights of his Tesla casting soft beams across the quiet cul-de-sac. Everything seemed normal, until he pulled into his driveway and noticed something strange. Standing near his garage was Karen, phone pressed to her ear, pacing back and forth like a detective at a crime scene. "What's going on?" Alex asked, stepping out of the car. Before he could say another word, Karen shouted into her phone, "Yes, officer. I need to report reckless driving. This man is a menace to the neighborhood." She pointed dramatically at Alex as if he were some kind of outlaw. Alex froze, caught completely off guard. Reckless driving? He hadn't even gone above 25 miles per hour since entering the subdivision. "What are you talking about?" he asked, his voice rising slightly. Karen ignored him and continued speaking to the dispatcher. "He speeds through the streets, makes sharp turns without signaling, and parks illegally. It's only a matter of time before someone gets hurt." Alex threw up his hands in disbelief. "I'm standing right here, Karen. You can tell me whatever issue you have instead of calling 911. But Karen wasn't interested in talking directly to him. She hung up the phone and gave him a smug look. "We'll see how cocky you are when the police get here," she said, folding her arms triumphantly. Within minutes, 2 patrol cars arrived, their red and blue lights flashing ominously in the otherwise peaceful neighborhood. Neighbors peeked out of their windows, curious about what all the commotion was about. Some even stepped outside, whispering among themselves as officers approached Alex's driveway. One of the officers, a calm and professional woman, walked up to Alex. "Sir, we received a call about reckless driving. Can you explain what happened?" Alex sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Honestly, officer, I have no idea. I've lived here for years, and tonight I drove straight home from dinner. No speeding, no sharp turns, nothing unusual. The officer nodded and turned to Karen, who immediately launched into her spiel. "Officer, this man drives recklessly every single day. His car is too loud, too fast, and too dangerous. Look at those doors." She gestured wildly at the Tesla's gull-wing design. "How is anyone supposed to feel safe around something like that?" The officer raised an eyebrow. "Ma'am, do you have any specific examples of reckless behavior? Or witnesses who can confirm your claims?" Karen faltered for a moment but quickly recovered. "Well, not exactly, but trust me, it's only a matter of time before something bad happens." The second officer, a younger man with a hint of amusement in his expression, leaned over to whisper something to his partner. They exchanged a glance before turning back to Karen. "Ma'am, unless you can provide concrete evidence of reckless driving, there's not much we can do. From what we've seen so far, everything appears to be fine." Frustrated and embarrassed, Karen refused to back down. "Fine," she muttered under her breath as the officers prepared to leave. "This isn't over." As the patrol cars drove away, Alex shook his head and headed inside. He thought maybe, just maybe, this would be the end of it. Surely Karen would realize how ridiculous she was being after involving the police for no reason. But deep down, he knew better. People like Karen didn't give up easily. If anything, this little stunt probably made her more determined than ever to win. And sure enough, Karen spent the rest of the night stewing. She replayed the events in her mind, furious that the police hadn't taken her side. To make matters worse, several neighbors had witnessed the whole thing and weren't shy about sharing their opinions. One elderly woman patted Alex on the shoulder and said, "Don't mind her, dear. She's always been a bit intense." Another neighbor joked about how Karen must have called 911 because the Tesla's futuristic design scared her cat. By morning, Karen had concocted a new plan. If the authorities wouldn't help her, she'd find another way to send a message. After all, desperate times called for desperate measures, and Karen was nothing if not resourceful. The next day, Alex woke up to an unexpected sight. Karen's old sedan parked squarely in front of his garage. Not partially blocking it, completely obstructing it. There was no way he could get the Tesla out without damaging her car or causing a scene. Standing on her porch with a cup of coffee in hand, Karen wore a self-satisfied smirk. "Good luck getting your spaceship out now," she called out clearly. Enjoying the chaos she'd caused, Alex groaned, rubbing his temples. He should have known this was coming. For Karen, this wasn't just about the car anymore. It was about power, control, winning. And as much as Alex wanted to avoid conflict, he realized he couldn't keep letting her push him around. Something had to give. When Alex saw Karen's old sedan parked right in front of his garage, blocking his Tesla completely, he felt a mix of emotions: anger, disbelief, and even a touch of admiration for how far she was willing to go. But mostly, it was frustration that bubbled to the surface. He stepped outside, coffee mug still in hand, and stared at her car like it was some kind of alien spacecraft invading his property. Karen, meanwhile, was perched on her porch steps, sipping her own coffee with an air of smug satisfaction. She glanced up as Alex approached, raising an eyebrow as if daring him to say something. "What is this?" Alex asked, his voice calm but laced with irritation. "Why is your car parked here?" Karen didn't miss a beat. "Oh, you noticed? Good. Now maybe you'll understand how serious I am about this." "Serious about what exactly?" Alex shot back. "You're blocking my driveway. That's private property." Karen shrugged, pretending to be nonchalant. "Well, maybe next time you'll think twice about bringing that thing into our neighborhood. It doesn't belong here, and neither do you if you can't follow basic community standards." Alex took a deep breath, trying to keep his cool. Arguing with Karen was like trying to reason with a brick wall. It wasn't going to work. "Look," he said firmly, "there are no rules against me owning a Tesla. And parking your car in front of my garage isn't just rude, it's illegal. If you don't move it, I'll have to call a tow truck." Karen smirked, clearly unbothered by the threat. "Go ahead, see if I care. But let me tell you something. You tow my car and this whole thing is going to escalate. You think calling 911 last night was bad? Just wait until everyone finds out what you did. Her words were meant to intimidate, but Alex had reached his limit. He'd tried being polite, ignoring her antics, and even reasoning with her. None of it had worked. Now she was crossing a line by physically preventing him from using his own property. Enough was enough. Without another word, Alex went back inside and grabbed his phone. He called a local towing company, explaining the situation and giving them the address. The dispatcher assured him they'd send someone over within the hour. As he hung up, he peeked out the window to see Karen still sitting on her porch, looking smugger than ever. Word travels fast in small neighborhoods, and it didn't take long for other residents to catch wind of what was happening. A few curious neighbors wandered outside, drawn by the commotion. Some stood near their driveways, whispering to each other while sneaking glances at Karen's car and Alex's house. One older man leaned against his fence post, shaking his head and muttering, "This is getting ridiculous." By the time the tow truck arrived, half the street had gathered to watch. The driver hopped out, clipboard in hand, and assessed the situation. "So, whose car am I towing?" he asked, glancing between Alex and Karen. "It's hers," Alex replied, pointing at Karen's sedan. "She parked it illegally in front of my garage." The tow truck driver turned to Karen, who was now standing beside her car, arms crossed and glaring daggers at Alex. "Ma'am, is this your vehicle?" he asked. "Yes, it is," Karen snapped. "And you're not taking it anywhere unless you want to deal with the consequences." The driver raised an eyebrow but didn't engage further. Instead, he calmly explained the law. Blocking someone's driveway or obstructing access to their property was considered trespassing, and the car could legally be removed. Karen sputtered, clearly caught off guard. "This is absurd. He's the one causing problems, not me." But the driver wasn't interested in her excuses. With a nod to Alex, he got to work hooking up the sedan. As the crane lifted Karen's car onto the flatbed, she looked absolutely livid. Her face turned red, and she started shouting accusations at Alex, claiming he was ruining the neighborhood and disrespecting her. Alex, however, remained unfazed. He simply watched as the tow truck pulled away, taking Karen's car with it. When it was finally gone, he let out a sigh of relief. For the first time in weeks, his driveway felt like his own again. As the crowd dispersed, whispers filled the air. While some neighbors sided with Karen, grumbling about how Alex should have handled things differently, others quietly cheered him on. One woman walked up to him later that afternoon, holding a plate of cookies. "I just wanted to say, thank you," she told him with a smile. "That car of yours has been such a conversation starter. My kids love seeing it, and honestly, I think it's great for the neighborhood." Alex chuckled, accepting the cookies gratefully. "Thanks, I appreciate that. Honestly, I never expected all this drama when I bought it." "Well, sometimes people resist change because they're scared of it," the neighbor said wisely. "But don't let her get to you. You're doing nothing wrong." Despite the support from some neighbors, Alex knew this wouldn't be the end of it. Karen wasn't the type to admit defeat, especially after losing her car to a tow truck. Sure enough, later that evening, he found a note taped to his front door. It was written in bold, angry letters. "You'll regret this. Mark my words. Alex," crumpled the note and tossed it in the trash. He wasn't afraid of Karen's empty threats anymore. What she didn't realize was that her actions were only making her look worse in the eyes of the community. Every stunt she pulled, calling 911, blocking his garage, leaving nasty notes, was chipping away at whatever credibility she thought she had. Still, Alex couldn't help but wonder how far she'd go next. Would she escalate things even further? Or would karma finally catch up with her? Either way, he was ready. He'd dealt with her games long enough, and he wasn't about to let her dictate how he lived his life, or drove his car. Little did he know, the HOA president had been quietly observing everything. Tired of Karen's constant complaints and increasingly erratic behavior, the board decided it was time to step in. They sent her a formal warning letter, reminding her that harassment and violating community guidelines were serious offenses. For once, Karen found herself on the receiving end of scrutiny, and she didn't like it one bit. As tension simmered beneath the surface, Alex couldn't help but feel a sense of quiet satisfaction. Maybe, just maybe, the tide was turning in his favor. Karen was livid, absolutely positively fuming. Losing her car to a tow truck wasn't just embarrassing, it was humiliating. The whole neighborhood had seen it happen, and now everyone was talking about her behind closed doors. She could feel their judgmental stares whenever she walked past. Some neighbors avoided eye contact altogether, while others gave her awkward smiles that said, "We know what you did." But Karen didn't care, or at least, she pretended not to. In her mind, she was still the victim here. Alex had brought that ridiculous Tesla into their quiet little community, flaunting its futuristic features like he was better than everyone else. And then, when she tried to stand up for the neighborhood's traditional values, he'd gone and called a tow truck on her. It was outrageous, unthinkable, completely unacceptable. She spent the next few days stewing in her anger, plotting her next move. She couldn't let this slide, not after everything she'd done to protect the neighborhood from chaos. So, she decided to take her case directly to the HOA board again. This time, though, she came armed with more than just complaints about Alex's car. She brought a list of grievances against him personally, accusing him of being disruptive, selfish, and disrespectful to the community. She even suggested that his Tesla might somehow lower property values, though she couldn't explain how exactly. The HOA president listened patiently as Karen ranted, nodding occasionally, but not saying much. When she finally ran out of steam, he cleared his throat and said, "Karen, I understand your concerns, but we've reviewed the situation thoroughly. There are no rules banning Teslas or electric vehicles in our community. As for your claims about property values, we haven't seen any evidence to support that." Karen's face turned red. "But what about everything else? He called a tow truck on me. That's harassment." The president sighed, clearly uncomfortable. "Look, parking in front of someone's garage is illegal, Karen. You were warned about that. If anything, it's you who crossed the line here." Her jaw dropped. "So you're taking his side over mine?" "It's not about sides," the president replied firmly. "It's about following the rules and respecting each other. Your actions have caused quite a stir in the neighborhood, and frankly, we've received several complaints about your behavior. We're issuing you a formal warning. Please don't let this escalate further." For once, Karen was speechless. A formal warning? From the HOA? Her own organization? It felt like a slap in the face. How dare they turn on her after all the years she'd spent enforcing their precious guidelines? Meanwhile, Alex was starting to feel like maybe, just maybe, he'd finally gotten the upper hand. Life returned to normal, or as close to normal as it could be in a neighborhood where Karen lived. The Tesla stayed parked safely in his driveway, untouched and unbothered. Neighbors who had previously kept their distance began warming up to him, stopping by to chat or ask questions about the car. One family even invited him over for dinner, thanking him for standing his ground against Karen. "You've inspired us to push back a little too," the husband joked, rolling his eyes, good-naturedly. "She's been breathing down our necks about lawn height for years." Alex laughed, grateful for the support. He hadn't set out to become some kind of neighborhood hero, but if his standoff with Karen helped others feel empowered to speak, then maybe it wasn't such a bad thing after all. As for Karen, karma had one last surprise waiting for her. A few weeks later, during a routine inspection conducted by the HOA, inspectors discovered several violations at her own house. There was an old shed in her backyard that hadn't been approved by the board. Her shutters were painted 2 shades, darker than the approved color palette. Even her mailbox flag was bent and rusted, which technically violated the aesthetic guidelines she loved so much. When the report landed in her inbox, Karen nearly choked on her coffee. Violations? At her house? Impossible. She stormed into the HOA office demanding answers. But the board stood firm. They fined her heavily and gave her 30 days to fix everything or face additional penalties. For the first time in years, Karen found herself on the defensive. She scrambled to repaint her shutters, replace the mailbox, and tear down the shed, all while dealing with the lingering whispers of her neighbors. Some took pity on her, but most couldn't help but find a certain poetic justice in the situation. After all those years of nitpicking everyone else's lives, Karen was finally getting a taste of her own medicine. In the end, Alex's Tesla remained a fixture in the neighborhood, a symbol not just of innovation, but also of resilience. Whenever Karen passed by, she glared at it like it was her personal nemesis, but Alex no longer cared. He had proven that standing up for himself didn't mean causing trouble. It meant setting boundaries and refusing to let fear dictate his choices. And as for Karen, well, she learned the hard way that trying to control everything often leads to losing control entirely. Her reign as the self-appointed enforcer of the HOA came to an abrupt end, replaced by a quieter, humbler version of herself who kept mostly to her own business. The neighborhood, meanwhile, breathed a collective sigh of relief. Without Karen's constant interference, life seemed lighter, friendlier, more relaxed. People started leaving their porch lights on a little longer at night, hosting impromptu barbecues, and decorating their yards with colorful flowers instead of sticking strictly to the rule book. As Alex sat on his front porch one evening, watching the sunset paint the sky orange and pink, he smiled to himself. His Tesla may have sparked a war, but it had also brought people together in unexpected ways. Change, he realized, wasn't always easy, but sometimes it was worth fighting for.